Good evening and welcome to the Metropolitan Republican Club's webinar series. My name is Krisha Lenzo, and on behalf of the Met Club board, we are so happy to have you join us tonight. As a reminder, we have a donation link in our live chat, and we hope you'll consider making a contribution to help support content and events like these. So tonight, we are very happy and excited to have Vernon Jones with us and welcome him to the Republican Party. Now a Republican, Vernon Jones was formerly a Democratic politician from the state of Georgia. He was the Chief Executive Officer of DeKalb County, Georgia from 2001 to 2009, and in the Georgia House of Representatives from 1993 to 2001. He has run for the U.S. Senate, U.S. House of Representatives, and DeKalb County Sheriff. Finally, Vernon Jones was elected to the Georgia House in 2016 and in April 2020. He announced his endorsement of President Trump for re-election, and he's been an outspoken supporter of the former president ever since. And tonight we're going to talk about some of the reasons why Vernon decided to become a Republican, as well as the future of the Republican Party. So welcome, Vernon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So kicking it off, you were formerly a Democrat, and you made this announcement, recently that the Democratic Party left you, and you are now a Republican. So we'd love to hear your analysis of why this, upset occurred and why you decided to become a Republican.
Well, I have to say, first of all, today's Democratic Party is not the party that John F. Kennedy belonged to. As a matter of fact, he couldn't even identify with today's Democratic Party. So do many of us. It's not our father's Chevrolet, if you will. The Democratic Party that I joined 30 years ago believed in low taxes. They believed in funding the police. They were totally against socialism, and they were a protector of the First, Second, all the other amendments. And so when I look at where they are now, where they're stifling freedom of speech, when they're defunding the police departments, when they're embracing socialism, when they don't want their children or their parents to have access for their children's school of choice, which I believe that children, or I should say parents, are much better at determining their children's education than the government. And when I look at all the other things they stand for, supporting Black Lives Matter and Antifa in the midst of their violence, where over 700 police officers were involved in injuries and over 20 plus deaths as a result of these violent acts and these riots. And so I just don't identify with them anymore. I didn't leave the Democratic Party left me.
It makes sense. We, at the Met Republican Club, have experienced a lot of this brutality firsthand, even with Antifa actually leaving fake body bags outside of our doors. So we can understand that perspective as well, some of the bullying and harassment that has gone on from the other side. That being said, can you talk a little bit about the recent events? Obviously, President Biden is now our president, and there is an upset on the 6th. Can you explain, from your perspective, what we saw then?
Well, I think you saw a lot of American patriots and those who love this country, who believe in free speech, who believe in peaceful demonstrations and peaceful gatherings. They gathered in their nation's capital in Washington, D.C. There were some who broke the law, and I do not in any way support anyone who breaks the law. They should be prosecuted to the fullest of the law if they broke the law. But let's be consistent here. Where was the outcry when Black Lives Matter and others, including Antifa, were destroying cities, government properties, burning courthouses, police cars, police stations, literally interrupting people while they were out having dinner, turning over tables? It was an act of violence. And I saw Nancy Pelosi, Maxine Waters, and many others, including Joe Biden, never calling those people out by name, by organization, saying they didn't support what they were doing. And the hypocrisy of it, because they made an outcry on what happened on January 6th, which was wrong, but let's be consistent. And I can tell you this, by and large, there were thousands and thousands of people who were there in Washington who have a right to be in Washington. It's the people's house, but they're supposed to abide by the law. And 99.9% of them did. They were there for the right reasons, and they did the right thing. And so when I see others, including those who are on the left, use Dr. King's speech when Black Lives Matter was rioting in a very violent way, saying that, well, riots as a result of people not being heard.
Mm.
Well, that was a misuse of his quote.
Mhm.
Dr. King never, ever supported any violence in his demonstrations, in his marches. As a matter of fact, if you were to be a part of that or tried to do that, he would immediately have you removed from what he was doing because it defeated the purpose. But people have their right to speak and have their right to let their elected officials know how they feel. That's their guaranteed right as long as it's peacefully. And I support that.
Definitely. And we've had Alveda King join us as well. And she echoes that sentiment wholeheartedly with respect to some of the events that have unfolded. So the Republican Party has certainly become one that is fractured. There seems to be, some might say, the rhinos, the establishment, and then there's the Trump patriots. How do you foresee the future of the Republican Party? And do you think a potential third party with some of those who supported President Trump might make sense here going forward?
Well, let me say this. Georgia, for example, is a red state. It is not a blue state. Obviously, the Republicans had some challenges. There were some missed opportunities. And, I joined the Republican Party because I identified with most of the things that they stand for. Their agenda: low taxes, supporting police, combating against socialism, school choice. I support those initiatives. But what my thoughts were in joining the Republican Party was to bring a grand new party to the grand old party, bringing brand new ideas, brand new people, brand new opportunities. The Republicans' way of doing things in the past in their elections, they're going to have to broaden their base. And the way that they broaden their base is by going to other conservatives. White liberals are not going to come to the Republican Party, but there are many African American conservatives, and there are many Democrat conservatives who support what the Republicans are doing. But they have to have more than just we're going to fight someone else's plan. They have to have a strong, comprehensive vision on where this country is going. That type of leadership is what makes things happen. Georgia was fragmented. Well, obviously, you didn't have the leadership here. And the Republicans here did not run in a pack. They ran separately. And again, there was no true leadership among the Republican leadership. But with that being said, I am pushing very hard on election integrity, election equality, at the same time, making sure that people feel like their voices are being heard. We're bringing in young people, which is important. Young people are the future of this party, as well as, again, I mentioned African Americans. And by the way, President Donald Trump laid out the format on how you get African American supporters. What did he do? He let his legislation and his acts and as president demonstrate that Democrats have been taking advantage of African American voters for so long just to carry out their liberal agenda, and didn't do anything to benefit the African American community. Didn't really do anything to benefit most communities with their failed school policies, among other things. And so I believe that we have a great opportunity in the Republican Party to unite, to recruit, to have a vision, to move forward, to take this country forward and make sure we preserve those values, those traditional values, among other things. And I'll give you another example. The Republicans never had an agenda on the environment. Well, that's important. Yes, a lot of us do not believe in the extremes of those who talk about climate control, but we all, as young people, we're taught how to protect our earth. So, one of the greatest conservations and preservationists was who? Theodore Roosevelt, a huge conservation. He was a Republican. I have a track record on preserving land, protecting green space, wildlife, including renewable energy. We have to talk about those things. And I'm sorry, I hate to say this, I'm a big protector of wildlife, but fish don't have to go to school, or people do. And so it is important that we do balance out drilling on American soil. So what? So we can be energy independent and not rely on these other countries to really literally lead us around on a chain and charge these outrageous prices. So Republicans have to have a brand new message, again, with brand new people, brand new ideas, brand new opportunities to move this country forward. And that's what I'm doing through my organization, wakingupamerica.us, going across this country with a consistent and conservative message that people can buy into and that we can work together.
Well, your message is certainly relatable, and we all view you as the future of our party. In terms of recruiting new members, as you mentioned, specifically those in the African American community who also feel that they have no place on either party, what can Republicans do to reach out to them, to continue some of the programs that President Trump put forward? What's next?
Well, I think the president did right to correct what Democrats did wrong, and that was with the crime bill. That laid at the feet of the Democratic Party. They pushed that initiative, President Bill Clinton, among others, and Joe Biden being the chief author. What the president did with prison reform, the First Step Act, was a great first step to look at those nonviolent first offenders. Well, I think we have to go to the next step. For example, let's look at criminal justice restoration, if you will, the Criminal Justice Restoration Act, I would call it, where you look at what makes sense. There are those people who are on probation who are not allowed to vote. If you go back historically, why were they not allowed to vote? Because Democrats had passed those laws, and Democrats targeted certain groups, including African Americans, to suppress their vote by doing that. And being a nonviolent offender on probation, what does that have to do with voting? Why can't they continue to vote? There's not a big issue there. I think the Republicans have an opportunity to let the African American communities and the white community, because many of them are on probation who cannot vote, let them know, hey, here's something that the Democrats did to truly suppress African American voters and other voters, and having that Restoration Act to look at, review it, and see if they can come up with a plan that makes sense, that allow people to go back and vote and participate in their right to vote, or I should say, participate in the election process. I think that's a good thing. On the environment, again, I think that's an initiative that Republicans can come out with an environmental plan. I know they're continuing again to fight the Democrats' plan, but Republicans believe in protecting this earth, and they believe in protecting the environment. Let's come up with a preservation plan to preserve more green space and open space, to preserve more wildlife. There are a number of things that we can do. Renewable energy. A lot of public landfills right now are releasing methane gas. Why can't we partner with them, give them resources to partner with private companies like the power companies to capture that methane gas and literally turn that methane gas into renewable energy, a green energy? That is what you call turning trash into cash. So we can be more productive. We can be more open with our ideas to attract people on all sides and both parties. I think it's a good thing. And the Republicans have a great opportunity now to do that.
They have this opportunity, but it seems more so on the Republican side than on the Democrat side that we're just not united. The Democrats really defend their own no matter what to the end, it seems like, but the Republicans seem so fractured. So what else can we potentially do to heal that?
Well, sometimes that happens, and it happens on both sides. The pendulum swings from one direction to the other. Everybody has those growing pains. Everybody, experience those. I mean, you have fights inside your own family and your organization, so that's normal. But I think Republicans, in spite of what's been really shaped by the media, mainstream media, if you look, Republicans picked up a significant amount of seats in the House of Representatives. The numbers are closer now. So obviously people were together. When you look across this state, across this country, I should say, most legislatures maintain their Republican lead, which is a good thing. It's showing you that it's there. The signs are there. Now, as it relates to president and relates to some of the Senate seats, yes, there were challenges, but if you drill down into it, you can see why. Again, those states are red states. They just didn't have a plan that maximized their efforts. And so we are unified. And I know there's some talking about creating different parties within the Republican Party. I think it's okay to have a group of people who support a particular issue within the Republican Party, but I hope they be mindful that we have to make sure it's always better to elect a Republican over our agenda than a Democrat who's supporting socialism, who's supporting defunding the police and raising taxes. So let's not cut our nose off despite of our faces. Let's make sure that we in the primary, let Republicans know how we feel. But at the end of the day, when we get into that general election, we should come out behind that candidate. And Ronald Reagan said something real important. Republicans don't attack Republicans. We disagree. but we don't attack each other, not to the point where we elect liberals who will literally destroy this country.
Well, cancel culture has become incredibly pervasive. Big tech, whether it's corporate companies, whether it's the mainstream media, what's your take on where we are right now with respect to people literally being censored, people losing their jobs, not being able to have their goods being sold at various locations? What do you perceive of all this?
Well, here's what's interesting. There's some will use an argument. Well, we're a private company, big tech companies, we can do what we want to do. But some of those same big tech companies are the ones who are screaming, telling other people, private businesses, that they need to raise their minimum wages. And as you know, and I know, when you raise those minimum wages, that result in an impact on those small businesses where either they have to reduce the number of hours for those employees or reduce the number of employees. And by the way, a lot of those big tech companies are moving forward, and others creating new technology, robotic technology, that's literally replacing jobs. So the same ones who are saying, that we should not, or we should be increasing minimum wages. Some of those are the same ones who are replacing these jobs with robots and hurting people in the economy. I will say this, free speech is important. If you're going to have a platform and you're going to open it to the public, if you truly want to open it to the public, then be consistent. You can't use your ideology or your party affiliation to shut some down and allow others to have a platform, to have a stage. I think that is inconsistent, and I think it's clearly it's a prime case of hypocrisy, and some would say being intellectually dishonest. And so I call on those in Congress to address that issue. Those in Congress can address that issue, and Democrats should be just as eager and just as involved in changing that as Republicans are, because sooner or later that pendulum will swing in the other direction, and it's going to come and attack them. So everybody want to raise their hand when their pants on fire. But when somebody else's pants on fire, they tend to, sit back and laugh and say, "Oh, his pants are on fire." So let's be consistent. It's good for the American people. We can disagree. It's okay to disagree. That's what makes America great. As a matter of fact, our Constitution protects those who are in the minority descent. That's why we have freedom of speech, those who may not necessarily agree with the majority. And sometimes we forget that. And that's why, I am carrying a message on protecting our Constitution. That is important. That's our very basic. If you start at the Constitution and go from there, like-minded people can come together and agree and agree what's best for this country and for its future.
Do you have any specific thoughts with respect to Section 230 and some of the outcries from people who say that it's really allowing these tech companies to function as they do and giving them this loophole to just censor whatever they want and to not be liable?
Well, clearly it has to be reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who legitimately saying, "Wait a minute, why am I being banned for expressing my freedom of speech?"
Right.
And then there are others who are expressing things that are a lot worse. I mean, we have foreign countries who are considered terrorist countries or considered countries who are not friendly to the USA, when they have their leadership having a platform to be on Twitter and some of the others, and then you ban some of our American citizens. I mean, you wonder, like, what is going on here?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're inviting outside influence by not shutting them out. They're causing a lot of the turmoil within. And then when you see the media take sides, I think that's one of the biggest culprits here.
Mm-hmm.
The media has not been held responsible. They need to be held responsible because they're creating this divide, because they're taking a political stand. They are no longer journalists. They've become activists. And when you see the majority of the media, mainstream media, projecting a certain side and supporting a certain candidate, and when one candidate does one thing and another does the exact same thing, one gets criticized and the other gets elevated, that is not good for the American people. That is divisive. That is creating a lot of havoc. And it's just not, it doesn't bode well for the American people in our country. Look, we all Americans, we can disagree. But at least allow us to have the freedom of expression. That's why I believe a lot of this would be addressed through hate crime legislation. And what I mean by that, there are people being targeted primarily because of their party affiliation and their party, or I should say, political ideology.
Mm-hmm.
They're literally being targeted both verbally, cyberly, and physically. Mm-hmm. And so if you make that a hate crime, I bet you $5 that will stop a lot of this foolishness, even when it's being that fire has been flamed by those many of those in the liberal mainstream media.
Definitely. We're going to turn to your race and to you and your future. And obviously, we mentioned you're the next generation of Republican. So when it comes to Georgia specifically, can you tell us a little bit about some of the efforts you've participated in there during the runoff, as well as the efforts that you've gone through with election integrity in that state?
Well, let me say this. I have a right, like many others have a right, to choose a candidate of my choice, to choose a position on the issue of my choice. That's the American way. That is a good thing, regardless if I agree with someone else or whatever. However, what's important across party lines is election integrity. That is so important. Protecting the right to vote, protecting a free, open, and transparent process. Obviously, in Georgia, there were some challenges, including one where the Georgia Secretary of State and Stacey Abrams, who has a political position with a political party, they had a backdoor agreement that had a black eye over the mail-in ballot process. And really, that should have been brought out, vetted by the Georgia General Assembly. It's in our Constitution that we, and only we, the General Assembly, can change state laws as it relates to the election process and the election laws. And that didn't happen. And that created, in many's minds, doubt, among other things. So working on election integrity is important to me, not only in Georgia, but across this country. And many people feel that way. You cannot discount that. Many people feel as though we want to have voting machines or equipment that votes cannot be changed. And where that data is housed is not in foreign countries, among other things. And who invests in that software? Is there political affiliation, or there's some partisanship as it relates to our election? So those things have to be rooted out. People want to feel comfortable. They want to feel like they trust the process. We're not a third world country. It's ironic. We have former presidents, including Jimmy Carter, who've had to go to other countries to monitor elections, when right here at home of the free and the brave, we've had challenges here. And so we do have to address that. It's kind of interesting when one candidate wins, they don't have a problem with the elections. But when their candidate loses, and all of a sudden they have a problem with the election. And so let's be consistent here. Let's take away the partisanship. Let's look at what unites American people so they can feel comfortable and trust in the process. That is so important. At the same time, here in Georgia, obviously, we're working on our conservative message and working on a message of funding the police, making sure that law enforcement are supported. They have to be. And you've seen cases where they're not being. At the same time, we want to make sure school choice is discussed. Why? Because failed democratic policies have kept many children in trapped schools. And many of those kids have been African Americans, where they're trapped there by their zip code or their address, where their mom and dad cannot get them enrolled in a performing school, so they remain in that failing school. I think the parents know a lot more what's best for their child and their child's education than the government. Give them that school choice so they can remove their child from a failing school and put that child in a performing school. And it's kind of interesting when we have illegals come to this country, and I support illegal immigration as long as it's legal and it's supported and laws are enforced. But when they come over here and bring their children illegally, and then later on you want to provide them amnesty and you want to provide them a sanctuary city or sanctuary community, and you say, well, those kids got here to no fault of their own, so they shouldn't be punished. Well, let's think about that in context of American families, mothers and fathers, when their children are in failing schools and they go and lie about their address and enroll their child in a performing school, taking them from a failing school. When they're caught, that child is not given a sanctuary school. That child is thrown out of school, and the mother could potentially be arrested. That's not fair when we take care of foreigners, illegals, I should say, more than we take care of our own American citizens. And you know, and I know, and American people know that a quality education for a child is the best thing a parent can give that child. That child has an upper hand to succeed in life. And I want to fight for those principles. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican, because both of them are trapped in failing schools. Let's do something to fix our education system.
Agreed. In your state, some people might say that Warnock won just a 2-year mandate to finish out the term, and that was the result of what happened in Georgia, as you mentioned, with some of the election integrity issues potentially. Would you consider running against him?
Let me say, I have no intent of running against anyone. If I did run, it wouldn't be against someone, it'd be running for the seat. It's the
Yes.
people's seat. I also would say this, I am very interested in pushing through the things we just discussed through my organization, wakingupamerica.us, and going across this country from Iowa to New Hampshire to South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, and all across this country, because I believe there are many people out there who feel like I feel, and I want to listen to what they have to say and get their input so we can have a united agenda, so we can come and again protect our traditional values in this country and provide the America that I grew up in and many generations before me grew up in for our future children. That's what's most important to me. You know, you don't have to be in public office to lead. Leadership is nonpartisan. Leadership is whether you're in or out of office. Leadership is those who believe in a certain cause and they get others to buy into it, and they come together with a strong force, a unified body, and push for things that they believe that's important to them. And so I'm honored to be out here now. Since my term is ending, I'm able to do a lot more traveling, crossing this country. I'm going to universities, among others, which is important because many universities now, even in high school levels, you're seeing where kids are not given an opportunity to hear both sides. Literally, you have teachers who are teaching them more on the liberal side. And when those who want to speak their conservative views, they're not allowed to do that. They're shamed. And so at universities, many times, if a speaker comes on that campus and some in the student body do not want to hear that, they put the pressure on the college president and others, and they cancel that person from coming on there. But universities was the one place where people could go and hear both sides. That's what you want to do. Let a person make their own mind up, but let them hear both sides. And so that's the story that I'm telling. That's the message I'm carrying across America, directly to the American people.
100%. And it's a positive message, which today, you know, as a Holocaust Remembrance Day, and, you know, we want to obviously remember the evil that has occurred throughout our world and still occurs to this day. So in your mind, how can we root out some of this evil so we never have to repeat history?
Well, you know, repeating history is something that actually happens. And I think some of us, though, we learn from our past to guide us in the future. But we have to remember there are things the things that are happening now. It's not like they haven't happened before. Some things we can learn from, and some things we can hold out for a while, and then all of a sudden we get too comfortable. We repeat history. You know, I think Thomas Jefferson once said that our country should go through every 20 years a major revolution. Well, what is a revolution? It's radical change. And it shakes some people up and makes some people feel uncomfortable. But when things shake out, eventually start to see, wait a minute, maybe we did go too far in that direction. That rubber band stretches, but it eventually comes back. And so I think things that we're really criticizing right now in many ways, it's good to have that analysis of it, but it's making us think about where we are and how we got here and how we can get out of here with good leadership, people listening to one another. Just because you're a different party of mine or different thought, you should not be my enemy.
Yeah.
We can disagree, but we're American citizens. We're a family. At the end of the day, when you live next door to me, you're Republican, you need a cup of sugar, or if I can loan you my lawnmower. I mean, that's what we do as American people. But we have to not let many in the liberal media divide us and create an environment where we literally, you want to target someone just because who you want to vote for. That's un-American. And that should not happen. And so there are those of us who are not going to be silent, and we shouldn't be silent. We're not going to sit on the sideline. We're going to come out. We're going to speak out in a peaceful way, in a way that we want people to know that our voices should be heard too. Whether we're minority or the majority, your voice should be heard.
On that note, Vernon, how can we support you, your efforts? How can our voice be heard? And what can we at the Metropolitan Republican Club do to get more involved in this effort?
Well, I'm glad that you all allow me to be able to talk to your organization. And I hope I've said at least maybe one or two things that you all understand or agree with. But I hope that also maybe you all can give me some suggestions and share with others. You can go to my website, wakingupamerica.us. You can sign up. You can be a part of our newsletter campaign. You can also share your input, because that's where the greatest ideas come from. The best ideas come from the American people. Several heads is much better than one head. And that's why I'm also almost on a listening tour, if you will. Listen what people are saying, because that's part of the problem too. Politicians have gone from listening to dictating what's best and what should be done, what should not be done, based on their own personal views, when they should listen to people. Sometimes you have to take a stand on principle, but be willing to take that stand, even if it costs you your election, because people want you to be honest. People want you to be straightforward. People want you to stand for what you believe in. And so I want to be engaged with your organization, meaning others. Again, you can go to wakingupamerica.us, engage us, be a part of what we're doing, share your ideas, invite me to come and speak to some of your various organizations, part of your online or in person, with your necessary restrictions according to your particular community. But I look forward to it. It's exciting. It's an exciting opportunity. And again, that's why I say I'm bringing a grand new party to the grand old party, with new ideas, new opportunities, new ways of doing things. And you know what? Again, keeping and making this America that we live in the greatest on earth.
Well, you are certainly always invited to join us at the Met Club on your tour, and also we are in full support of you, whether it's you're running for office, which we would all love, given the political landscape, but not as a leader as well. The way you can make the most impact, we support that too. So again, so appreciative of your time, your positive message, and your ability to give us hope for the future of the Republican Party. And welcome to the Republican Party again from the New York Metropolitan Republican Club. We are so happy that you are on our side, and we will support you wholeheartedly.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to sitting down with the leadership of the RNC and having these discussions.
Of course. Thank you so much, everyone, and take care and follow Vernon, and we'll put all the links in the chat. Have a great night.